Hello, everyone. Is that Weems guy actually back to do an episode of my very own show? How about that? It's only been like a month since I've done an episode. Thanks to your Hearn and Holston and everybody else who sat in on the last one. I think it was Tim Burke and Randy Harris. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but everybody who sat in on the last episode. And we had a milestone. The podcast feed has now gone over 100,000 plays. Now, that does not include the numbers from YouTube plays, and I don't know what those are. But we've crossed the 100,000 mark for podcast episodes. So, Bryan, does that make us certified gold now?
I do believe so, and it might have slowed down enough. I cracked 100,000, and now it's like 200,000 is a it's a big jump. But
Uh,
congratulations, 100,000 is a big milestone. That means that the average listener has listened to you more than most of your family members have your entire life. So
that does not surprise me at all.
when that occurred to me, I went, "Oh wow, yeah."
Uh,
So
you all should be recognizing that voice. That is Bryan with a Y Eastridge. Uh, and
yeah,
he and I will be talking about stuff shortly. Um, After I have other big news to share with you. Well, first, let me kind of explain what's been going on, why I haven't been here for like a month with a live episode of my own. As you all know, I've been graduate school, tenured David Kegel, um, and just had a couple of weekends where the only time I could work on an assignment was on a Sunday, and I was, up to the wire on that, just could not stop to record an episode. And since I'm paying a lot of money in tuition for the graduate school classes, and I get a grade on this, I kind of figured that was a little more important. The other was I caught a crud that took me like a solid 2 weeks to even come back to the land to live in, and I now know it was RSV virus, and that's nasty stuff. And but I'm over that, and I actually did my assignment for this week on Thanksgiving night, so that I would have some time this weekend to try to get an episode in the books. Now for the big news. Also, if you've been listening uh, or watching, you know I've been going through some professional turmoil over the last little while, and that has finally come to a crux to a certain degree. I am in the process of changing agencies. I will do that this week, and I'm not going to publicly disclose where I'm going to work because I am not going to be in a policy making or spokesman decision, thankfully. And I don't want to, if I'm out saying something that it goes running back to my now, who will be my bosses. What about your employer saying this? So I'm going to try to keep that separate. Please respect that because if this starts to interfere with my work life, this will have to go away because I've got to pay bills. Uh, I am staying in a law enforcement training capacity. I will say that. And it's actually pretty substantial move as far as like the agency is involved. I want to be clear that I am leaving my current agency very amicably. This is not an angry divorce whatsoever. I was not happy and I didn't feel like I was contributing. And, the agency had created this spot for me and it just was not going the way the agency wanted as well. And so this other opportunity came up and it's allowing me to leave with my head held high and walking out, not feeling like I'm a failure, that I'm actually going to something very positive, and it's allowing me to leave with the agencies not having to do ugly things. And so it's a win for everybody involved. And it created an opportunity. Someone has already been promoted into my spot. Very good opportunity for them. And well, my spot as it was is going away. They got the rank that I'm giving up, got promoted to that. So good for some other people involved. As the agency gets a breath of fresh air, I get a breath of fresh air. It was extremely hard to make the transition from having been chief deputy to being back in a basically a line level position. It wasn't hard for me to give up being in charge or anything like that at all, but there was just some other things that were making it very difficult. There were some people in the public that still were calling me for things, and that was creating awkward circumstances. There were a few people in the agency that now had the opportunity to twist forks and knives and pour salt on wounds that did not have the opportunity before, and they're still mad because they didn't get a car in 2011 or something along those lines, and it was their opportunity. And then there were some others that, it was hard for them to kind of recognize me as a peer and an equal. Like one of the other people of the same rank would not call me by my first name. I'm like, dude, we're the same rank. He's, I can't do it. I can't do it. You were a chief when I came here, and I just can't call you Lee. I'm like, dude, it's okay. And just so it was like really awkward with stuff like that. And it's just time. It's just time. And this gives me some flexibility down the road that I would not have if I stayed with my current agency. So again, no hard feelings on my part, and I'm leaving very amicably. And hey, how you doing, Bryan?
Well, good, man. I got to tell you, there are a lot of people out there that never reach the point. They hold on to the point it's too long. Uh, and I've seen that for decades in law enforcement is like when all the signs are there that it's time to move, they hold on and then they leave because they have to, not
Yeah,
because they have the ability to.
right.
And the other part of that is, being in a training role at a certain point, you got to let other people take the reins. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, especially
Yeah,
um, when you've built your own system or your own ideals and foundations, to allow growth to happen. Sometimes you just got to get out of the way. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But, um, the blessing is, and Hanny McMood, when I retired from my agency, he said, man, at least you got to pick when you walked out the door.
yeah.
And he's like, a lot of guys don't have that luxury. And so I take it as a real blessing. And I'm happy that you're moving on. Because I know now you'll be a little less radio silent. So uh, that's good.
I
When I,
don't know.
when I call about some esoteric thing, you'll at least, I'll know you'll have the capacity and the time to take it here in the future. So
Well, we'll see. One of the things that I have enjoyed about the position that I'm leaving is that theoretically it was much less public profile than the position that I was in. And once I finally got the reporters to realize I was no longer the PIO and to quit calling me and all that kind of stuff, I very much have enjoyed stepping away from that part of my life where everyone had access to me and a way to get to me, and having to constantly be available. And so
sorry,
I'm
I'll
looking.
put you on my calendar now if I need something. It's
When I had my formal interview for this spot, I told the big boss that I was cured from wanting to be in charge. He looked over at somebody and said, "Write that answer down." And I'm really looking forward to not being responsible for anybody but me.
there's a
Um,
lot to be said for that. And retirement, that is has been the case, except that next year I'm getting married, so I will
oh,
have
well,
to.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah,
I knew you had told her that you weren't going to do that till you retired. And I've been kind of waiting for that shoe to drop.
yeah. It's not completely official yet, so nobody
Okay.
nobody blow the whistle on me. But yeah,
Uh,
we're gonna do a little jewelry shopping because we're both adults, and
yeah.
the whole surprise thing is kind of that was in your 20s,
Yeah.
so now we're approaching this the way I wish most people would, which is
Yeah.
like with some common sense and
Yeah.
what do they call that? Experience and knowledge
Yeah.
behind us. So looking forward to that. Yeah,
Well, next year's only about 35 days away. So,
but it's also 365 days long. So
well,
figure I got three.
if you get married on New Year's Eve this year, you can claim like the whole tax deduction for the whole year.
Ooh, yeah, we may have to have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, when we go back and backtrack, I'll say I'll be responsible for myself. Yeah and no, because I still will have like people that I'm training, people that kind of like, so I'll be responsible to them, and the like. But it's not going to be like it has been.
Yeah,
And I'm looking forward to that. So
I'm excited for you.
it's this is a good move, and the timing was just absolutely perfect. Um, there was kind of an active pursuit on the other party's part when it's always nice to be recruited and wanted. And they didn't specifically set out to recruit me, like, hey, we need to go get that guy. It was, I had a meeting with one of the bosses about something else. And then he kind of, in the middle of the meeting, is like, hey, would you be interested in coming over? Actually, kind of, yeah, I am. And some things fell into place. And that happened. But enough of that vagary. We shall remove on. And this isn't vague booking, it's vague podcasting, I guess.
Vague cast.
Vague casting. Vague casting. All right. I posted in the That Weems Guy show group on Facebook. For those of you that are on Facebook, if you're not yet in there, hey, somebody give me show ideas for the night. And several people posted some questions, and Bryan and I will both take shots answering those and discussing those topics. And then we're going to go into, Bryan was just part of the Revolver Roundup, and then he and Bulky have a new venture in the works, and we'll get into that. First thing we'll talk about is one of the questions was that I have mentioned that I don't have a light on my duty handgun, and they want to know what the reasoning behind that was, and if I have dedicated home defense weapons, do they have lights on them? So, first, let me clarify that while I still go out and do cop things up until later this week, um, I have not been uniform patrol since 2009. So I wear a soft uniform to work. I basically wear Duluth khakis and a polo shirt. Um, Occasionally I put on the uniform and work a patrol shift and the like. I have been subject to call out a lot. And if I'm not actively going into buildings at dark places that, looking for bad guys, I don't really see a point in the weapon light. To me, it just adds bulk. It makes holster selection harder. It's just, I think there's some problems with a lot of the weapon light holsters out there that create openings where fingers and foreign objects can get into holsters and get to trigger guards. And to me, that's a bigger issue than the rare instance in which I may actually need a weapon mounted light. As my mentor, Tom Givens, would say, it's got to be light enough for them to see you. So it's going to be light enough for you to see them. Now, there's a caveat of that, excuse me. Cops do go into buildings in darkness and the like. I just use handheld light to search in those instances, um, because I don't want my muzzle and my flashlight being married to each other in those situations. Also, typically, if I'm going actively hunting bad guys, I have a rifle or a shotgun, and my handgun then becomes a secondary weapon. Um, I'm going to default to, um, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm getting old, and names of Larry,
Budget?
yeah, Larry Mudgett's definition of a handgun. Why do we carry it? We carry it to defend against sudden unexpected attack. Yeah, I've got lights on my long guns because I think that is necessary for a socially active long gun. But handgun is for if I got to suddenly fight and defend myself. It's not a proactive tool of any extent, in my opinion. As far as like dedicated home guns, yes, they have weapon lights on them because they're long guns.
Yeah,
Uh,
much easier to manipulate a long gun when you have the light attached to it, as opposed to
all right.
trying. There are methods. There's some modified retention methods that you can use to deploy a handgun light with a rifle or a shotgun,
Mhm.
a pump shotgun, have a light on that dude. It's not pleasant to run with a handheld. It can be done.
Mhm.
Not it's what does Tom say? It's suboptimal. Uh,
Yes.
my last, well, 2005 until I retired, I carried a weapon mounted pistol light. Um, I was pretty enamored with them in 2005. By about 2010, I had started to see a lot of the shortcomings. By 2015, I was like, I don't even understand why we even do this at this point. However, um, the low light training up to that point was just pitiful, and it was a good crutch for people that couldn't shoot one handed. It really was.
Yeah.
In all honesty, it put muzzles on people that didn't need to have muzzles put on them. Um, it caused a lot of training confusion between we're trying to be stealthy, we don't want to have a light on, and to identify or get identified, but we also need to identify a threat. So you end up with training confusion, which is very, very bad and detrimental. Um, Also, I'm feeling a little pressure here, Lee, because you had Randy Watt on talking current events.
Yes.
I feel like a schlub when it comes to, like, Randy Watt is up almost to deity level, and here
Right.
I am, like, I've just learned to write with a pencil. But anyway, the holster thing was the first thing that became an issue, and then threat identification, and then muzzling people, and we started seeing case after case after case of these things. And I really was like, the only time I found it to be extremely useful was if I was hunting for a known bad guy in a building.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's a place for a long gun. Unfortunately, with dynamic situations where things evolve, and you might have to leave right now and not deploy with a long gun, it had some usefulness
Yeah.
there, especially in conjunction with a handheld. Like it was really useful with a hand, tied in with a handheld. I never liked the switching systems. I never liked the holsters. And now we're being forced into a position where if you want an optic on your gun, you got to have a light on it.
Yep.
If you want a light on your gun, you're going to have an optic on it, because holsters, the way they dimensionally form them, I know a little bit about, and it's way easier for them to make one than it is 20. So,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's a real detrimental thing for certain applications, but it certainly causes, in the world of limited training time with law enforcement and limited low light training time, um, it causes a lot of training confusion. And that's something I didn't coin that term. I don't know where I
Yeah.
got it, but training confusion is a thing that happens in the, open world of defensive carry. I don't see much use for one at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
Um, if you want to carry one, get after it. But I really don't see the need. Now, I'm not going to be anti-gun light, but I
Right.
just don't really see where it fits the bill for most people. Because, like Tom says, criminals aren't out feeling around in the dark for victims. So you got to see, they got to see you, and you got to. So in turn, you're going to hopefully see them.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
You know, there are other holster makers, but Safari Land is really the only game in town when it comes to duty holster. Now, I know there are others. Matter of fact, I have some U.S. duty gear stuff. Um, but back in the day, when weapon mounted lights became a thing, you had to specify which light you had and get the holster that fits your gun in that light combination. Well, economics being what it is, form soon gave way to function, and Safari Land figured out, well, we can make one big gun bucket that encompass, accept all the weapon lights, and we don't have to make different, you know, 3 different Glock molds or 5 different Glock molds, and then have to make 5 different M&P molds and the like. We can make one. And some of those big gun buckets, to accommodate the light, there is a noticeable gap where I've taken pistols, unloaded them, put them in my holster, and I can reach down and make contact with my finger on the trigger. And I know of numerous instances in which there have been discharges of firearms in the field from foreign objects getting into duty holsters. I know the SIG 320 gets a bad rap, in part deservedly so, but I also have seen them in duty holsters, which you can physically see the trigger while the gun is in the holster. That's a holster problem more than it is a gun problem.
Yeah.
And
My former agency, which I'll tell you is Oklahoma City, we had a couple of young lads wrestling around with a suspect, and I think I mentioned it somewhere before, but a Springfield XD, don't judge, Springfield XD discharged in the holster. That was actually a very popular platform at my agency for a long time because we couldn't get Glock 40 caliber guns to run, and those ran pretty stinking well. They finally kind of run their service life, and they're going to deauthorize them here in the next year. But the way those TLR, which was it, the TLR1, the very first full two battery setup, shows you how long I've been away from it. TLR1.
I know
Anyway,
there was the 100, then the 200, and then I think there's the 300s now.
oh, that's the Surefire X
Okay.
series.
All right. Surefire is what I carry. So it's,
Yeah, and I never cared for the switches on Surefire. I never could get them to. They were always a little stiff. But the other part was the TLR ones. The bezel was user replaceable as opposed to having to send it in. So I could go to the local cop supply store, and if I cracked a bezel or something like that, I could just have them replace it. Whereas the Surefires had to go back to the factory. So our local cop shop had a couple of loaner X300s that they would rotate through just so you could keep a weapon light. But it left the holster cut on that particular model left a big enough cut that this suspect wasn't even trying to get the cop's gun. It just a big tangle of bodies, and this kid's hand gets kind of wedged into a holster and it discharges. And the response to that was not these holsters allow your finger into the trigger guard. It was, well, everybody tighten them to the point where you can't get the gun out. Which absolutely defeated any the reality of it. And, as I look back, I realized the agency didn't want to deauthorize half their fleet's guns and holsters. So the answer was you have to tighten all these screws and do all this stuff. And it really didn't change the fact you can get a finger in there and discharge it. But, echelons above my pay grade.
I think it was the National Park Service that it wasn't even a confrontation. It was a medical call. And like one of the flap closure pieces, like they were bent over working on a patient on one of the flap closures, like a med bag, got down into a holster, and somebody stood up and it got the trigger on the gun. And that's problematic.
Yeah, the caveat really is for me carrying one, and this is not me being an elitist, but I always carried a double action first shot gun until I went to bike patrol. And by having the hood of an SLS system of the Safari Land, you could pull on that double action trigger all day, and unless the holster or unless the gun was improperly seated, you couldn't get the hammer to push through that rubber strap. It just and I worked and worked and worked because to try to see if I could get even a single discharge out of it. I couldn't get the gun to fire with it with the hood engaged. So it's a benefit for a DA first shotgun, but that's archaic. So get you killed in the streets or whatever.
There you go. Those dang streets, they can get you when you least expect it. Yeah. Do you think we sufficiently covered weapon mounted lights on pistols?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All
I,
right.
I
Well,
like the Tom Gibbons method. It's your butt. Do what you
yeah.
want.
Yeah. I've got, again, I say I've got no problem with people that just want to carry the light as long as they do it right. And I'm not saying I never go out without one. Like I say, especially I went on a hunt to find duty holster that would accept the optic on the pistol that did not have a weapon mounted light attached to it. And that's got me into some US duty gear holsters. Just because. But if you're going to Safari Land now and you're going to run an optic on your gun, that's going to mean a weapon mounted light as well. And that's just the case for data for the private sector folks. Don't have to worry about such things. You just go get some local Kydex bender to bend what you want, and you're good to go. And of course, they could go into a whole nother discussion on optics, but we're going to save that for another time. All right. Alex Sansom, the suited shootist, brought up a topic that we want to delve into a little bit, and it was elitism and disconnect in the training arena. And I asked him to elaborate, and he basically, came back with like if people that take the opinion if you can't do my preferred skill to my standard, then you're just not dedicated to this. Or if you're not, it's like if you can't perform a sub 3 second build drill, then you're not dedicated to carrying a pistol. Or, if you're not carrying this gun with this piece of equipment on it, if you're not appendix carrying a rolling special, etc., you're just not dedicated. And I just, go back to when Tiffany and Akil were on several episodes back, and they're saying when they're dealing with new students is they ain't us. And for the most part, I can get away with carrying a full size gun everywhere I go. For the most part, about 1% of the time I can't. But that's not the case for everybody out there. It's not the case for most people out there. We need to have allowance for that. And folks, there's really not that much of a functional difference. Oh, we'll break the internet again because we broke the internet a couple of years ago in this. There's really not much of a functional difference between a 1.1 second draw and a 1.4 second draw or a 1.6 second draw. There's just not that much of a functional difference. There's not that much of a functional difference between a 0.25 split and a 0.4 split. If we're
Nope.
arguing to the right of the decimal, then it's just not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah, Cooper said something about becoming enamored with inconsequential
Mm-hmm.
metrics or something to that effect. I'll find it in one of the books I just bought at Gunside, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Uh, but I really the elitism in training is to me is stomach turning
Yeah.
because it involves instructors that are literally catering to about 10,000 people in the entire United States or
Right.
trying to capture 10,000 people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
When the reality is there's over 20 million gun owners, and they're a whole lot like my mom, my stepdad, my brother-in-law
Yeah.
that might get to the range twice a year, maybe. Um, and I talked to Hearn about this. I don't know if there's an actual calculated metric of the people in the past students of Tom Gibbons that have been involved in defensive shootings, and I just equated that with well they've been through 24 hours of basic instructor or something, and he kind of said without putting a hard number on it, he's like no, the bulk of those had 4 to 8 hours of training total, which one speaks really well to Tom's program.
Right.
But two, those are normal earth people. Those are the people I don't worry about the guy that's shooting a 2.5 split and telling me that if I can't do a sub 2 second build drill, I'm like, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
my mom is 65 years old, 66 years old. What do I tell her? What do I tell her? Well, you have to get familiar with this handgun, and I need you to train to this metric, this arbitrary metric that somebody who's trying to sell a class sells. And I think that's just BS. And I think we should dispense with it. Same with equipment. Well, that's one of the reasons I gave up shooting a Beretta 92 in classes, because people would fixate on the gun. Whereas if I carry a Glock like everybody else, or 3/4 of the other students, and I shoot it to its potential, then they don't blame their lack of ability on my gun. So, and people get dogmatic. It all the way back to, you even go back to the early API gun sight stuff, and they talk a lot about the 1911 platform. It's a great platform. At that era, it was probably the top of the heap, but the bulk of cops in America were carrying revolvers. So, know your audience a bit, right? And I'm not knocking API for the time. I mean, they were trying to make everybody aspire to a better standard, which some of where I'll give grace to the people that are really dogging this training metrics and all that other stuff, is they are trying to make people better. But in doing that, they are eliminating or talking above the people who need it the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll try to dig up the exact quote that I made a while back in conjunction when you and I were breaking into the internet over the whole Sub-Zero draw thing. I put something out to the effect of, the people with no actual experience tend to focus on the metrics, and the people with actual experience tend to focus on the mindset rather than the metrics. And I know the standard response is always, "You're just saying that because you can't do it." Nah. All right. Uh, oh, anybody that wants to compare shooting resumes with me, I'll be happy to do that.
And that's what it immediately boils down to, though.
Yeah.
And you know, you talk to the best living gunfighters today, and it's like, sights I can see, a trigger that I can manage, and the gun's got to be reliable. Everything else falls to mindset.
Yeah. And it's I equate it to like the shotgun. You go to a 1 or 2 day shotgun class, and you spend all this time on shooting drills and reloads and etc. with everything that you're going to do, you could possibly do with the shotgun. Okay. Really, all that matters is getting it up and getting in action and getting that good solid hit, because then it's over and done with. It's not going to
With
get
the
to the
proper
point,
load, yeah.
right? It's not going to get to the point of, you know, who had the best time on a Rolling Thunder, everything. Now, there is a direct correlation in the enjoyment of a shotgun class and the number of times you run Rolling Thunder as the instructor. Because I can tell you that the more I run it, the better the students seem to enjoy it. To the point that I've actually started telling them that's why we're going to run it several more times. And they're like, "Yeah, it was great. Can we do it again?" It's to learn how to manipulate the shotgun under all the conditions. That's why you do those drills. But if I'm spending all of my time trying to set up my shotgun and my equipment to optimize my performance on Rolling Thunder or some other similar drill, I'm kind of going to a lot of effort for something that's really not going to matter. And by the same token, if I'm trying to set up my handgun to optimize performance on specific metrics, I don't know how much of that translates. I don't think much of it translates at all. And it's like, I can give you way better scores with a dot on top of the pistol on all them, like anything we're going to run. I'll give you better scores with the dot. I don't know that it functionally means much in the ways that I'm actually going to be using a handgun.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of that floating around the industry, and I think some of it's positive because it gives that niche of people another, what I
Mhm.
would call your like your they actually have a word for it in the retail market, the super consumer.
Yeah.
That's somebody that's going to buy a gun a year, 1,000 rounds of ammo, and attend one training class. They spend about $1,200 to $1,500 a year on gun centric stuff.
Yeah.
Super consumer. Those people, that gives them something to aspire to. Okay, you're missing out on the 19,900,900 and whatever people that are out there that probably need some level of proficiency way worse than this little sliver of people up here in the corner.
Yeah.
Um, and I get really tired of like the leg hiking and peeing on other instructors and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's like, look, I would rather train, 100 church ladies a year to get a J frame into action in a reasonable amount of time
Yep.
and score high center chest hits with it every time they press a trigger and safely run it than I would let me shave a quarter second off your draw. That
Right.
guy doesn't need help.
Right.
Um, and that's where I feel like we overlook a lot of things like NRA Basic or USCCA's Basic Pistol Course. Um, your local gun range. My buddy Will Andrews puts on some great 4-hour blocks in Oklahoma City, and I go, he's got 20,000 students that you're never going to hear their name. You're never going to see them on
Mhm.
YouTube or on Instagram. And a lot of those people just need the proficiency to be able to carry a gun every day. Um, we can argue all we want over this 10th group of maybe 8 to 10,000 people. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of over that piece. I don't really care that much anymore. So,
Yeah. It kind of goes back to this whole lame argument too, or saying cops can't shoot. And that's usually coming from people that are like expert master B class, A class or higher, or at least or people who know those people and see them shoot and they say, oh, that's good shooting. And they see some instance in which a cop really didn't perform to that level. All right, I'll give you that. But if we're going to take a random cross section from the 20 million gun owners out there and take a random cross section from the million cops out there, I would much rather go into a room in a dangerous situation with the cross section of the million cops than I would the 20 million gun owners, if we're accepting that number as accurate.
well,
Now,
here,
if I get to handpick my kickball team,
yeah.
that's different.
Yeah. Well, here's one to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Cops can't shoot. Okay, fine. If you look at the Leocas reports every year, it should be summed up as cops can't drive
Yeah.
because they're not losing too many gunfights.
Right.
But man, that Ford Taurus, Ford Explorer, Crown Vic, whatever it is, that's killing
Mm-hmm.
them wholesale.
Yep.
So I really, yeah, maybe they don't possess the highest degrees of marksmanship skill. I get it. Some of them endanger the public more than they endanger the bad guy, but they're not losing their life to gunfire at near the rate they're losing it in car crashes.
Yeah.
So I will accept cops can't drive.
Yeah.
Cops can't shoot. I'll leave that one up to the imagination. The other piece of that a lot of people overlook is an armed citizen may process one violent encounter in their entire life. They may see it and avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
They may, if they have some degree of listen to your sixth sense or they've had some degree of training, they may be able to avoid that situation. Cops process that situation multiple times a day, every
Yeah.
day for years. And that's the one advantage that I see that they have over a lot of just maybe even and I don't want to dog on competition shooters, but even that where they have a lot of processing to do all the time, and yeah, it's something you can't discount. But let's just say cops can't drive. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, the typical shooting problem that the cop and the private citizen are going to face is really not all that hard. It's really not that difficult. And quite frankly, a C class or sharpshooter class IDP, upper level sharpshooter IDVA class has got plenty of skill to handle the typical shooting problem that anybody would run into. That whole driving thing, man, that gets in that, we we see it all the time too. Private citizens crashing, cars are getting killed. Traffic death is a socially acceptable way to die.
Yep.
And it's just, they're
Sad to
just as
say
gone
that.
and just as dead as if someone murdered them. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's, and we could engineer our way out of a lot of it, but it would cost millions and millions and millions of dollars to go change intersections and go do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there are intersections in the county in which I still currently work that we have a paging system that anytime a wreck with injuries happens, it sends out a text message to all of our phones. And there are like 4 or 5 locations that if I see a wreck come up at one of those locations, that's how everybody rolls. Because there's a pretty good chance we've probably got serious injury or fatality. And it's the way it is.
Well, and here's something to think about. Those people drive every day.
Yep. Yep.
You might get one violent encounter in your entire life, maybe
Yeah.
two if you're
Yep.
just a bad decision maker.
Right.
You drive every single day. So the law
Yeah.
of probabilities catches you there.
I have 2 great fears in life, and I will publicly disclose that one of them is. One of them is I am deathly afraid of heights. And
You too, huh?
it doesn't have to even be really high to qualify to trigger my fear of heights. But I don't have a problem flying. And like been asked, like, man, you're so scared of heights, but how can you handle getting in an airplane? It's professionally maintained. It's being operated by a professionally trained, held to a very high standard pilot with a crew. And once we get up in the air at that cruising altitude, the only other people up there are those same people. Yet I've been on a 2-lane road with nothing separating me from someone hurtling towards me at 65, 70 miles an hour. And, a Honda Civic with a donut tire on it,
Then
hurtling
a
toward,
piece of a
yeah,
piece of paint.
yeah. And one of the fenders is flapping and dragging behind it. And the only thing separating us is a 4-inch strip of paint. Okay. The flying doesn't scare me. I actually kind of feel at ease up there versus driving cross country. If it wasn't for the fact that if I didn't have to deal with airports and the like, then I'd fly everywhere I go. But
Well, my two fears are heights and flying, period. And I used to jump out of planes, so that ought to tell you something.
yeah, I never will publicly reveal what my second great fear is because I work with cops and I know what would happen.
We could get into phobias like dentures and some other stuff, but
Oh yeah, yeah. I worked with a cop one time that let it be known that she had a phobia of fish, and oh, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, horrible. The places that fish turned up.
oh gosh,
Yeah,
sharks, man.
yeah. It was
Gotta,
bad. All right. Well, if anybody's still with us, as we've been rambling on for a while here, tell everybody about the Revolver Roundup. How'd it go?
well, this was my third attendance to Gunsight Academy, to the Pat Rogers Memorial Revolver Roundup. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving every year. I went the first year as a student, and Daryl was kind enough to invite me back year 2 and 3 as a presenter. So great time. I took my dad this year and a couple of friends of mine from the East Coast that Michael and Jason and then Michael Lessman from DSM Safety. I got a big Airbnb and we all camped together, and it was just it was a good fellowship. It was like a dude weekend. I told my dad, he was fretting over what holster, what gun, what ammo. And I said, man, this is a great hang where you're also at gun sight and you get to shoot cool revolvers. Like, just don't sweat it. I think we're already about halfway through ticket sales, and they just opened yesterday.
For
And
the
I
2024 event.
For 2024, that event has grown like wildfire the last 2 years. First year I went, I think there were 70. The next year there were 90, and this year there were over 100 attendees. And when gun sites parking capacity starts getting stretched, you go, oh boy,
Yeah.
this is pretty wild. But yeah, it's a great time to do some historical deep dives on revolvers, which also correlates to where did we come from in training, which also correlates with here's gun sight. And I've said it before, competition or defensive shooting, all roads pretty well lead back to gun sight at some point. If we're talking modern training, right? So it's a great event. It brings together a lot of people that know each other in the virtual space, and we get to like open some people's eyes to like vintage police training courses and shooting courses, some of which make you realize, man, even the mediocre dudes back in the day could run a wheel gun, right? Some of those revolver courses, you're like, man, this would be tough with an auto, like Bakersfield or the LAPD qual, even the Oklahoma City qual for years with a 6-shot revolver it can be a pretty spicy event. So a lot of history, a lot of really cool guns, a lot of priceless pieces that are just sitting in some guy's holster, and a lot of good fellowship. I mean, everybody gets done with class, goes and hangs out on the mess deck and talks about old cop shootings and cop training. And we had some guests there this year that were Mike Wood, the revolver guy that wrote the Newhall, the book about Newhall. He was there, gave me a signed copy of his book. Thanks, Mike. And my dad has not returned it to me yet because he hasn't put it down. But you have generations there of people that started out in the military, law enforcement, with revolvers that never really quite got trained the way they should have been, to guys that were really proficient with a revolver in that revolver to auto transition time, to guys like myself that we came in on the tail end of the revolvers and had to learn them by default. So, man, it's just, you put all of that knowledge under the mess deck at Gunsight, and the admission alone is worth going just for the barbecue, right? So, and I don't think we've done a good job of saying we start Friday, the Friday before, with a barbecue. We got Rob Leahy from Simply Rugged Holsters, Sam DeZonia from Wilderness, Nancy Stevens from Tough Products. They're all there supporting the event. And you can buy holsters that you can only see online, right? It's stuff like that, or support equipment that you can actually put your hands on. Our mutual bud Mark Fricky brings like 100 revolvers with different types of speed loading devices and all that. So there's just no other place you can get that much hands on that fast with revolver knowledge, and it is the event that I really look forward to all year. I love TacCon. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying TacCon. That is a great event. This event is just, it's as much of a hang as it is training. So, TacCon is very training centric. This is a little more casual,
Mhm.
and a little more historical. Uh, but yeah, this event, I'm already planning my class for next year, and my class is. But and this year I taught with Caleb Giddings again. We got set at the kids' table because we're the youngest two instructors there, and I did a block on police pistol combat or police pistol competition or practical police course. I've seen it published all those different ways in the NRA manual, so I don't know what it's even really called.
Yeah.
But I did a little deal on that. He did a deal on IDPA. Two very different disciplines that have a lot of overlap. And then I did a block on one-handed shooting. That was just one-handed marksmanship with a revolver, and it went really, really well. As always, there's a YouTube video that I made, a couple of them that I made that I launched on the American Fighting Revolver YouTube channel, which supplements the Patreon channel. So tons of
Well,
fun, man.
I'm going to hold up my everyday carry belt EDC belt company hat here and say this stepping on toes that I'm about to do is sponsored by the EDC belt company.
Perfect.
Set it on right here. All right. Take a guy, since you mentioned him, a guy like Mark Fricky.
Mm-hmm.
Mark was back. Mark was doing this stuff in the golden age of the revolver. Mark was part of the revolver to semi-auto transition. Mark was part of the adoption of pistol-mounted optics and the developing of the training methodologies and the like that go along with that. That's a guy that's been around and been relevant through three major paradigm shifts of training and equipment. That's a guy that you need to be listening to. But to go back to like one of the early things we discussed tonight, and Alex Henson's topic that brought up the elitism and stuff out there, because he's not trendy on the YouTube, on the Instagram, out there shooting these drills that, he's got this signature drill that if you can do this and everything else like that, I'm not going to pay attention to listen to him. The guy is solid gold. Everything that comes out of him about training, he's like, when I started delving into the pistol mounted optic and everything, he brought up the point of, well, we saw increased scores when we went from revolvers to semi-autos because people went through training to start carrying the semi-auto. Pretty soon it regressed back to where it had been. What are we
Just with
seeing?
more bullets.
Yeah, kind of seeing the same thing with the pistol mounted optics, although the sighting system being that much easier to see and use. I'm not seeing that much of a regression drop off from total scores, but I am seeing people that go through a transition course and then that don't keep up with their training come back out, and sometimes they struggle the next time they shoot or get into a qual course. And that kind of, okay, now I got to be on this. I got to be practicing my stuff dry. Those are the people that you want to listen to. Those people that have been around for decades doing this, that have seen all the trends, that have seen all this stuff come and go. Those are the
And
people
come
that should be,
back.
because those are the people who should be the elite.
Yeah, one would think.
Yeah.
And one of the things with Mark is, much like Tom, he's seen those trends come and go and come back. He's in the third turn,
Yeah.
just like Tom is in the third, almost the fourth turn now.
Yep.
Back to, and I'm not dogging completely on optics. You and I both went to Eric Gelhaus's school, which was, I think, is probably the industry standard for how to teach people to run a weapon mounted optic, or a pistol mounted optic. But the thing I'm seeing that I got lambasted for about 4 years ago, and now I'm having people in the training industry go, "Okay, Nostradamus," because I said, when you train these people up, if you don't implement a sustainment program, they're going to be worse than they were before.
Yep.
And a lot of my PZOs, I said, weapon mounted lights were a great idea. How many weapons do you check in a weapons inspection that have dead batteries and or no batteries in them? And now you're relying on that for their primary sighting system. That's not a good combination. Um, and especially if we don't implement sustainment, we're going to see massive increases in scores. We're going to see massive increases in qualifications. Well, give me a shooter and give me an 8-hour block and 400 rounds of ammunition. I'll make them good with a BB gun. I don't like, they'll be as best as they've ever been with a Red Ryder. But give me 18 months of never having them touch that gun, but for a 25 round qualification, they'll be worse than they were when they showed up the first time.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the rubber meets the road on the agency side. On the individual side, the average dude that trains, the average super consumer, you give him a weapon mounted light and an optic, he's going to train with it.
Yeah.
You give the super cop, the range junkie, um, Bruce Cartwright had a very, very non PC version way of saying a gun guy. But you give that guy, the dude that's, the range is his home away from home. It doesn't matter what sighting system you give that guy. It doesn't matter what handgun you give that guy. It doesn't matter what holster you give that guy. He's going to run it until he can't mess up with it.
Yep.
But there's 20 million other people out there that just need to know which end the projectile comes out of, and that just because it says 357 Magnum doesn't mean you have to shoot those out of it, right? That's the consumer public we should be concerned with. But
yeah, my soon-to-be former agency, our range is shut down right now. Not for like anything bad. We actually shoot on a range of some private property, and there's some timber being cut off of the property. And I understand the timber guys don't want to be down there cutting timber on the property while we're shooting. Got it. So we've been borrowing ranges from other agencies to, finish up our annual qualifications and stuff. In the last month, I've run 2 rifle class / rifle quals and had people show up that had dead batteries in their optic on their patrol rifle. And I'm sitting there thinking, one, why are you betting your life on this equipment when you're not making sure that it's functional? And I'm thinking number 2 is, okay, obviously we have patrol corporals and sergeants that aren't doing equipment inspections on their people. And that's how simple is it to change a battery in an optic?
Depending on the optic, it can be complex.
Well, for the pistol mounted optic, it can get complex, but for like a Aimpoint Pro, righty tighty, lefty loosey, take it out, put the battery in there, and we provide the batteries for them. Now, had we been at our range in the building there, I've got a box of batteries, but I wasn't at my range, and I didn't have that. That would have been something we'd have got everybody out. All right, everybody check, optics good. Oh, your battery's dead. Let's go grab a battery, put it in there. Tisk, 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 tisk. Now let's roll. And I remember last year or the year before, started to do a rifle class / qual, and had to go, hey, my optic's not working. And so, when's the last time you changed your battery? And his answer was, they told me the battery would last 5 years. Okay, that doesn't answer my question. Well, it does, but that's not. So when was the last time you changed your battery? I asked it again, thinking maybe you didn't understand. He gave me the same answer. Oh, they told me the battery would last 5 years, which says he's never changed the battery in his optic. Well, I bought the rifles. I bought the optics. I knew how old they were. I said, so this is the original battery that came with this optic and has been on your rifle the entire time this rifle and optic have been in. Well, yeah, but they said it would last 5 years. So how long did it sit on the shelf? We got.
Yeah.
I tell you what I do when I put a new optic on a gun or something like that. I throw the battery that came with it away and I put a brand new Duracell in it, and then I
Yeah.
change the Duracell. Which reminds me, next this Friday is battery changing day for pistol mounted optics. So it's
Yeah. And for the individual level, what does it matter?
yeah,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, but at the agency level, it's critical.
yeah,
And, that's where I think we have a lot of delineation in the training world is, a lot of people view it through the LE lens, or they view it through the mill lens, or
mm-hmm.
they view it through the competition lens, or the armed citizen lens. And it's like somewhere in the middle of all of those is what meets your needs. And most people, I'll just say it, most people that train never really identify what their needs are.
Yep.
They just don't. They go
Yeah.
to, training session after training session, and it ends up, well, I didn't do so hot. Well, maybe if I did what the instructor does and I got this pistol with this optic,
Yeah.
and they never really determine for themselves what that looks like. Um, when I was a full-time cop, I carried my duty gun off duty, um, just mainly because I didn't want to qualify with a whole bunch of guns. But now that I'm not, and I can carry whatever I want, man, a snub revolver in my pocket and maybe a second snub or a compact auto fits the bill. But
Yeah.
that's 25 years of combined knowledge and training and experience that go behind that to know what I can do with those platforms. And that's not, if I'm teaching average Joe citizen, that's probably not what's going to fit their bill. It might be. But if I'm so hedged into, well, if you can't shoot a bill drill in 1.8 seconds, then sorry, or if you can't plan the right stage, or if you don't have a this or a that or a weapon mounted light, or and that's where another place I think that the instructor community falls short is, don't try to make carbon copies of yourself. Just
But,
don't.
and teach one of the few things that's different in my law enforcement classes from my private citizen classes. This is one of the very few things. Is the amount of time that I spend on reloads in the law enforcement classes is much higher than the amount of time I spend on the private citizens. And I tell the cops the reason for that is not because I think reloads are that important, is that they're having to shoot the scored course of fire that puts such a penalty on if you don't get it done in time, in the specified amount of time, that you lose so many points on the qual, and some of them are struggling to get the points
Right.
that they need. For a private citizen, I'm not saying I don't run them through scored courses of fire. I just get to pick it, and I don't put one that puts an emphasis on reloads because it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen
We
statistically.
see very few, if
Yeah,
any. Um, and I was looking back through some of the archives, and a lot of the defensive shootings I'd seen that were involved a reload were an off-duty cop.
yeah,
Like, so I'm not saying you won't have to. You need to know how to do it, but do you need to spend an inordinate amount of time speed reloading your,
right,
G19?
yeah,
Probably not. If
right.
you've launched 15, 16 rounds into the public, it might be time to turn and run.
Yeah,
Uh,
whatever you're
but
doing is not working.
it ain't working. Move on.
Yeah,
Um, but there again, there's always the outliers, the anomalies, and we need to be prepared for those. But um, if I'm teaching somebody that's very competition centric, it's like, yeah, you need to be able to stuff your gun before you move or as you're moving. But anyway, that all goes to, um, one of the things I've found recently is just trying to meet students where they're at and not where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that's the thing, is what is relevant to their world, to the student's world. If the student is working a white collar type job, where if they get discovered carrying a firearm at their job, they face rash professional consequences on that. They're probably going to go with something that's much easier to hide than a full size gun. And we need to have the ability as instructors to teach them for that. Okay, oh my gosh, that pistol isn't going to perform as well on the metrics as a gun that I set up specifically, for a drill. Right?
yeah,
It's just, I can game my gun gear. I can. I've gotten to the point, like when I teach a private citizen rifle class, I've gotten where I make sure I wear blue jeans to teach, and not even anything tactical looking pan or anything like that. I wear blue jeans, and I run my spare magazine is in my back pocket.
yeah. Twice in the last year
Yeah.
teaching with bulky, I've had a student come up and go, or a host or somebody go, hey, we're going to go down here. We need to put our gear on. Do you guys need to put your gear on? We've got a safe area. And we're like, we showed up with it.
Yeah.
This is way, this is how we're going to roll. Oh, I didn't even know you were carrying. That's the point.
Yep.
But, I mentioned to a friend of mine at a dinner, we had a little private kind of meeting of the minds a few months ago. And one of the kids that was there said, he asked a bunch of us, he said, what's a big red flag for you? Or how do you, and I said, if an instructor shows up without a gun on, that's a problem. Especially if you're taking a
Yeah.
defensive shooting course. If they show up and they don't have their gun on, you should probably just go, well, we'll, eat the meat, spit out the bones. But that's genuinely, that to me is like a huge red flag. Now, if it's, hey, we're teaching a duty style deal, and I came in so carrying a gun and I need to put on a duty, I get that. Or I'm taking a competition class and somebody's got to put on a competition rig. But if I'm taking a defensive handgun class and my instructor goes, excuse me, I have to go down the line and put on my gear, that's a red flag. That's a huge one to me. Um, yeah, just personal thoughts, but
You
man,
know, I saw the interview that Jim Skelton did with Jeff Cooper 20 something years ago. I saw it again this week. And it was funny. Cooper was one of the founders of IPSC. So he knows why IPSC was invented. All right. And he made a comment, and I'm paraphrasing here. So Shane Gosa, please don't get upset if I don't get the quote exactly right. Cooper talked about kind of basically the people that shoot the matches and everything and let them put their gear away and leave without, not carrying a gun. So it's like they don't even understand the purpose of the exercise.
right. And
And why, this whole thing with all the competition was initially a laboratory to test tactics and methods. And of course, eventually the game side of us took over. And now you're shooting these guns with these, compensators and, frame mounted optics and all that kind of stuff. And then that's why IDPA came off of that and formed again. And now we kind of seen that same trend chase in IDPA. And it's, folks, don't get us wrong. The gun games are fine. There's nothing wrong with going out and having a fun, and you can improve your skills to it that way, or keep your skills fresh. But that's not the be all end all of it. I'm not going to choose my carry gun based on the rules in IDPA or because of what division it fits into an IPSC or USPSA, whatever you want to call it.
yeah. And my last, I think the last time I shot a quasi formal match, shot with my carry gear, and I placed like in a 100-man field, I placed like 12th or 18th or something. And I went,
Yeah.
if I can do that against guys shooting comps and optics and pistol caliber carbines,
Yeah.
because they were there, I don't think I'm going to get killed in the streets today, but who knows? Somebody could get lucky.
Yeah.
And
I used to be amazed back when I shot matches regularly and I was shooting GSSF and I was shooting IDPA. Guys that I couldn't touch on the IDPA range because of all the movement and all that kind of stuff couldn't get within 20 seconds of me in a GSSF match when it's stand in one place and deliver. When it was just about the shooting skill, I could trounce them. When it was the movement, all the other kind of stuff, I just couldn't stay with them. Now, you can, in your mind, decide which one of those is most important, and I'm not going to argue with you in the audience over that. But yeah, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
my business partner in the belt company, he shoots GSSF like every weekend.
Yeah.
And, he's gotten to the point that those Glock 1099s, from winning so many guns, they start to stack up. But he set out and he said, this is a sport that I can compete in as an armed citizen where I get a lot of gun handling, a lot of gun manipulation. And there's not the, you know, there's not the max, I call it the Max Michel factor, which is you train like an Olympic athlete every single day
Yeah.
to be able to shave an eighth of a second off your movement from box to box. And I get that.
Right.
To me, I really like the GSSF matches. I haven't shot any. I've sponsored several, but I think that's a great place to test your gun, your gear, stuff like that, and have an environment where you're not at the, well, I can't run as fast as that guy, or I've got 2 hip replacements, I can't move as fast, whatever it is. I think those are a sound deal. Same as Steel Challenge. I think that's a really good one as well. But IPSC, USPSA, IDPA, they're always going to be the gamer. There always is.
You get the
And
same pressure testing benefit that you get in GSSF that you would get in USPSA.
yeah. I mean, stand on a line in front of 20 people and shoot your gun for score when everybody else is watching.
Yeah.
That to me is where the skill comes in, and the ego either has to die or it takes a brutal death, right? But you were asking me about the revolver roundup, and then we toddled into another rabbit hole with thank you, Mark Fricky.
There you go. Well, before we get out of here tonight, tell everybody about the American Fighting Revolver.
So that is a project that Daryl Bulkey and I have talked about for the last couple of years. Just kind of in a roundabout way. And I've had to learn to do a lot of audio production and video production and things like that. And we kept getting, what do they call it? Zucked, where any content we were putting out on the free social media was getting squashed. Same with YouTube.
Yeah.
So we started the American Fighting Revolver Patreon. It's $5 a month, and it allows us to get content out that's not squashed by algorithms. And even the content that we've put out that's free, even on Patreon, has gotten squashed in the algorithms for the ability to view it. So putting it behind a paywall, for some reason, that doesn't, for now, it doesn't get smashed in algorithmic stuff. So we started that, and we're doing, every week we profile either a historical revolver or configuration. Our last one was on kind of vanilla guns that we carry every day, and surprisingly, it got a massive amount of traction. I was like, hey, like 2 episodes ago, we did a registered Magnum, and people liked it, but people really loved seeing the J frames we carry every day. So there's that. I've got a YouTube channel. It's AFR official at AFR 350. It's AF Revolver 357 at YouTube. I put up some videos that I produced. Melanie Bulkey was generous enough to devote a little camera time and make all the instructors look pretty. So I put up a roll of that. Just did it, launched a sponsor video today. I didn't catch all the sponsors, but most of them that we had video content of, like Taurus, Tough Products, Wilderness, Simply Rugged, and Ransom Rest of all people. They were there. And we got to do some video rolls of them. I'll be at SHOT Show filming a little bit of content on a revolver that is getting ready to hit the market that I can't talk a whole lot about. But all my buddies asking me about what snub revolver they should buy. I keep saying, just wait till January. Just wait till January. Or buy one now and buy one in January. But anyway, we were involved in another deal, and on our road trip for this last revolver manufacturer project we were involved in, I was like, man, we have between us enough revolvers that if we did one a week, we could do the next 7 years without ever having to buy another revolver again. So, and we're profiling historic revolvers, historic modifications, modern revolvers, revolvers that have some provenance, and trying to get some of that history documented before all of us get too old. And oddly enough, the demographic that subscribes the highest to our Patreon is 35 to 45, which I think is perfect, because that's people that can carry the torch after we're gone. So it's American Fighting Revolver at Patreon. We don't have it set up for a 1-year subscription yet, so it's $5 a month. But I think you get a video and an article that are behind the paywall, and then anything that's kind of like centric to the industry, like the Revolver Roundup. That stuff comes out free, and it links in through there, and it goes to YouTube and some other places. But yeah, we launched that, and it's been pretty successful thus far, and I'm really excited about it, because I got Daryl so motivated now that it is unbelievable. We had a pile of guns, and we were sorting through these guns for which ones are we going to do a video on and a photo reel and all this, and talk about it and talk about the provenance. And at one point I said, Daryl, you realize we have like $500,000 sitting in the floor just in gun cases. This is awesome. So, and it's just stuff we've accumulated through the years being revolver enthusiasts. Got plans for a podcast that's going to go behind the paywall, and which brings me to, I still do the off duty, on duty podcast. I've slowed down to like one a month, because I caught the crud you caught, and I've had, life's been busy. Also, the belt company is kind of changing gears right now. It'll be the same. It's just I'm not going to be as heavily involved in it. So that's getting ready to unfold in January. You won't notice any difference. The website will be a little modernized, but yeah, the American Fighting Revolver, and just the response has been overwhelming. I'm really enthusiastic about it. We're going to have some merchandise after the first of the year, some t-shirts and hats and patches and things like that. And it's just a lot of fun. And if you you can Google Pat Rogers Revolver Roundup, and the video will come up, and you can see what you missed out on this November and what you need to jump in on next November. And Daryl and I, oddly enough, we have gotten a lot of demand to come out and teach revolver classes, stuff that we kind of put on the shelf and thought, maybe someday when they ban all the magazines, then it'll be relevant. I say that tongue in cheek, by the way. But yeah, I mean, I've done a couple revolver classes. He's done a couple this last year, and the response has been like, I'm sorry, we'll come back next year and we'll get
Mhm.
you in one. so, so yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm doing all the media production work for it, and yeah, there'll be a presser coming at SHOT Show. Tune in, because there's a gun being released at SHOT Show that I just wish I could talk about, but I can't. And and it is cylindrical in nature. It's about all I can say about it.
We're only two
But
months. We're only 2 months away.
yeah, and I've got SHOT Shows my next big deal, and I'm going to film probably 4 or 5 videos out there, and then some of them will be on YouTube. Some of them will be beyond behind the paywall, but the paywall just allows us to bring better content that doesn't, it doesn't trigger the Facebook and Instagram smash. So ballistic testing and shooting and training tips and things like that just get crushed on the open social media. So yeah, I'm sorry if
And
I seem a little enthusiastic here, but
the other great benefit of that is that if people are paying for it, you're not going to get the people that are typically aren't going to get the people that just drive by and take their random pot shots and they don't know what they're talking about.
yeah, and it actually has a chat function. So and I monitor it. Daryl monitors it, and Melanie Bulky, Super G, she monitors it. And it's unbelievable the amount of positive comments you get versus, well, that's stupid. I'd never do. It's, hey man, who's got load data for a 44 special? Because hey, I'll hit you offline. Send me your email address. It's a real sharing of ideas versus somebody comes in and carpet bombs the place with doo doo and then leaves. It's so that was one of the things that really surprised me, was just the chat forum in Patreon for our channel. It's been overwhelmingly positive. There's no buttery, so to speak. There's no self-appointed expertise. It's just a really good place to share ideas, and nobody's going to say a charter. I wouldn't carry that. I mean, it's a little more niche specific, I guess you would say, and a lot of fun. I mean, I got on there today and somebody was asking me, hey, my girlfriend wants a revolver. What do you guys recommend? And the comments were, well, if you don't carry a 44 mag, you'll get killed in the streets. It was like, hey, Ruger LCRs are available, and if you
Mhm.
shoot those with a downloaded round, it's not a bad option. And the LCR 22 carries 8 rounds. So um, yeah, it's been refreshing having been in the gun space for about 5 years and just slogging through the negativity to see that come to fruition. So yeah, I'm excited about it, and it's rapidly turning into a full-time job, which I kind of like. And it's stuff I'm passionate about, and I took down my Patreon. I had the Eastridge Training and Consulting Patreon, and I found out really quickly that the bulk of the content people wanted was like me tearing revolvers apart and diagnosing them. And I was like, that really doesn't fit into what I started this for. So with Daryl, it just kind of was a natural fit. So, man, we're having a blast with it. And, you know, got a couple of good lavalier mics. And funniest thing, if you guys watch the first video, we did 5 takes on that with a script. And I threw the script away and I went in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we just went. And it was like, hey, that was easy. We actually do this pretty well. So there's a little secret sauce that nobody knew. Yeah. So yeah, it's
All
fun
right.
stuff. I'm sorry if my propeller's spinning a little
No,
hard. I
no,
really
no, no.
like, really enjoying that. And open enrollment, you mentioned something about open enrollment classes we're doing this year. We're working on a revolver symposium, because a lot of guys on the East Coast can't make it out to Gunsight. So we're going to try to do a mini one for next year. Um, and see what the response is, and try to pass some of that knowledge to the next generation of people that maybe can't take a 5-day journey to gun sight. Maybe, and I don't know that we're not going to sell gun sight out here in the next week or two. So, um, it's looking like that's probably going to happen. 2 days with 4 instructors in 4 4-hour blocks, and we're really going to try to push for that this year. And other than that, Daryl and I got a huge demand for revolver open enrollment training. So stay tuned. It'll all go through the American Fighting Revolver Patreon and YouTube, and working on a social media page and some other stuff. So yeah, it's good stuff, man. It's really good. I'm really enthusiastic about it.
Well, good, good. All right, folks. As far as my open enrollment right now, the answer is pretty simple. I don't have any. I will be finishing up my second graduate class in this program. I think we have to have everything turned in by the 14th of December. And I think I've got 3 more summits that I've got to get done between now and then. And I'm unsure as yet as to whether or not I'm going to enroll in the spring, because with the new job, I don't know how all that's going to work out. I'll be talking with my new bosses about that in the coming weeks. And so I'm not scheduling anything until I know, for one, if I'm going to be enrolled in the spring. I'm not going to have time from January to May to be teaching open enrollment classes. And then, as I said, I'm starting the new job, so I will have 0 hours of leave come Friday morning. And so I'm going to have to build some of that back up. Now, one thing with the new job is I will have comp time that I can use to go do stuff. So I'm probably not going to be getting out of the Southeast much for the next little while for
Well,
teaching purposes. So,
Lee,
but
I would like to commend you that this is the first episode I've heard in a while you didn't rip on John Hearn. Which brings me to my next question. Is there going to be a cognitive conclave this year?
that is dependent on all of the above, as far as like the new job and ability to travel for that, or we just do it here again, and whether or not I've got the grad school thing going on. So it's if I'm able to go in the spring, I finish the program in spring, because it's only a 4-class program. It's a graduate certificate. It's not a full-blown degree. So I hate to quit in the middle of it. And as one wise person told me years ago, the time's going to pass whether you do it or not. And I don't want to be sitting there in May going, you know what, you'd be done right now if you had just taken these other 2 classes. And so I can't imagine myself not doing it, but I need to clarify some things before I do. And there's always time to pick on her. So, yeah.
Well, that's one episode in a row I didn't hear a cheap shot at Hearn. So,
Well, I took a cheap shot at him yesterday on the phone, so I did have it out of my system. So
good. And I will, this is my shameless plug for John Hearn. If you haven't been to his Who Wins, Who Loses, and Why lecture, well worth the time and money investment. That was far and away one of the best. And I enjoy lectures that are, one, entertaining, and two, very data filled but digestible data. He does a fantastic job. So, yeah, good on you, John Hearn.
He will actually tell you everything he knows.
He will.
When he gets done, he's like, it's all out. Everything he knew, everything he knows, he told you.
Yep. And it is very good. So
I concur. And folks, Bryan, thank you for jumping in last second tonight to help put together an episode. I understand. Well, you're retired, but you've got a whole lot of stuff going on now. And I know your time is important. And to the audience, we know that your number one asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.